What is up, sexy people of the internet? It is Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from UK Sludge quartet, Wren.
Did not have France. Sorry, I had France on my list. I did not have
France.
UK. There's something French about this. We'll get into it.
The band's new album, Black Rain Falls, will be released on February 21st via Church Road Records.
Salute the Church Road.
For over a decade, Wren have meticulously crafted a sound and aesthetic inspired by the complex nature of the lived human condition, being as cathartic as it is bleak. They aspire to connect with each person encountering their music, be it through recorded or live listening. In whatever way it is experienced, the music is a visceral offering to its audience to take from it what they will. The theme inherent throughout Black Rain Falls is the shared grief of the band members. The members of the band experienced a tragic loss that has redefined their reasons for living and playing music. This is how the band, in their own words, described the album. The new record is a crystallization of the conceptual voice-giving to natural collapse, humanity's decline, and the shadowed spectre that has imbued Wren since the beginning. The album was recorded and mixed by Scott Evans from Kowloon Walled City at Anti-Sleep Audio. Big man Scott. Wren. Album number 3, Black Rain Falls, 7 tracks and just over 35 minutes long. Duncan, I for some reason had never heard Wren before. I missed the first 2 albums somehow, but obviously old Church Road Records flashed a wee torchlight on that, like, hey Dave, how about you check out that new Wren album? And that I did, Duncan. That I did. Shortest album to date. But do not be mistaken. Oh no, Duncan, because there's a couple of big old heifers on this album. That's right. Big old 8-minute bastards.
At the front.
Yeah, which they don't build into. Just like,
no.
Here you fucking go.
There's your dinner. It's on a plate, bitch.
No waiting to the end. No. Wren are up front with their length.
Up front, cunt.
Yes, Duncan. Up front gun. Tracks 1 and 2, both around the 8-minute mark. And this is like, I had a look at their previous releases. This is quite common on a Wren album to have something, a bit lengthier. They have on occasion stretched over that like 10-minute mark on previous releases. They did that on the previous album, Groundswells. But on this release, 8 minutes seems to be the kind of longest they are going to sustain their brand of bleak sludgery. And when most people are reaching for a little album to kind of pull them out of the January blues, Duncan, at Metal Epidemic, you like to really wallow in that misery.
I mean, yeah, we're just past what Blue Monday was, a week ago, so
yeah,
Dave's still got the blue light on behind him.
No joy January, Duncan, which has led into no fun February.
Yep.
And if there's an album that really captures the mood of despair and anguish, then Black Rain Falls is the one. Wren, yeah, they do not do cheery albums. This ain't no Weezer album. This is, if Weezer had a grey album.
Texas. I thought that's where you were going, man. I swear, this ain't no. And I was like, oh, what am I doing here?
No,
and Dave said Weezer. Which
I
don't know if that's just going to upset people or not.
If Weezer had a grey album, right?
I thought they were.
If they had a grey album.
Weezer's grey album.
And
just covers the Wren songs.
If it sounded fuck all like Weezer, right? And it was great.
Like, you know how like Weezer like to deploy the hoo on their albums, it would be like ah. That's the sound they would bring in.
Yeah.
I, for one, am all for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that's a negative thing. It's not.
No,
it's great. And although like the subject matter of like loss and grief, and I think this in this case it's to do with someone taking their own life. And it's hard hitting. But Wren have kind of like packaged that kind of pain in a way that really comes through in the music. When I was listening to it, I was thinking it's not like a million miles away, like almost conceptually, to like what Still did last year with a Theft.
With a Theft,
Although they're more on the kind of black metal side, and this is much like slower and deliberate, but that album was also about kind of grief and loss and stuff, and it came through in the music in a big way. Totally my wheelhouse though. Like I've come to realize, like I think I tend to connect with albums that have like a much darker subject matter.
Are you saying that you're a miserable bastard?
I think I am. Yeah.
Some of us have known this for a while.
My wife says it on a daily basis. As I'm listening to the new Wren album. I think it's just something about albums that really like convey a feeling and sense.
I've told you, I like music that makes me feel.
Yeah.
And a lot of music doesn't make me feel it anyway. And I think the biggest crime you can have is an album which, I'm not saying you have to feel miserable. Smiling and headbanging and having fun is a feeling. But see music that is so banal and so beige that when you get to the end of it, you really don't have anything to say, either positively or negatively, to me is a wasted exercise in listening to. I would much rather listen to something I despise than listen to something I have next to no opinion on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I feel like Black Rain Falls like gives me plenty of emotion. Like there's a lot of stuff coming through in this music. In terms of the sound, it does have like a bit of a kind of Neurosis streak to it. It's very, very dense sounding on the sludge front. Probably heavier than Neurosis, to be honest. But you also get this like kind of post-metal kind of backbone.
It's 100% got a big old weighty fucking Kowloon post-metal streak right through the middle of it.
Yeah.
And when they lean into it, you forget that you're listening to something that, like, when those sludge riffs then kick in, it fucking breaks your brain a little bit. That's why I thought they were French.
I can see that.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like, because like you get this kind of very, very cold, very metallic sound.
Yeah.
But when the sludge elements kick in, that's the bit that I'm like, well, yeah, only the French would do that. Only the French would marry these two flavours up. Crazy French bastards. Turns out not crazy English bastards.
Yeah. Well, when they hit like a kind of like climax of a track, like even like the closing of that opening track, Flowers of Earth, is just disgustingly heavy. Like, and it's not like what came before wasn't heavy, but they just seem to be able to kind of like level it up whenever they want. But I also love the fact that this is not just like an album that's like a wall of sound. Wren are very good at like implementing space in their sound, or just kind of pulling back ever so slightly on that really like corrosive heaviness to give you something a little bit more kind of minimalist. And I heard it on, I think it was Toil and Undergrowth, which is the second track. I was like, all right, okay, starting to hear a bit more of that coming through. And actually, like on my first listen, I didn't know that Scott Evans was behind the desk on this album. And I was like, that second track, I was like, oh, there's a bit of a Kowloon Walled City thing going on in this track. A little bit of that aroma here. Some of the chords and the kind of atmosphere of that track did remind me of that band, which is not a bad thing, by the way. They are like one of the best to do it, so I mean that as a compliment. But it also makes like those heavier moments, the more kind of drone-like moments, just even more ugly and even more crushing. And that track in particular just like continues to pile on, and then hits you with these huge kind of stabs of like crushing sludge where it gets really discordant. But the contrast of those two kind of levels work really well on that track. I really enjoyed it. Also worth saying that the album, for like a sludge post-metal album, it doesn't just sit in the one pace either.
No.
Which you tend to find with a lot of albums in that style, but like tracks like Betrayal of the Self, for example, lifts the pace, like veers more into like a almost kind of like noise rock kind of tempo. It's a wee bit more kind of angular, a little bit more fiery. There's also this, I don't know what it is, but there's a kind of like industrial kind of pulse in that track that just kind of sits in the background, and it's like almost like mechanical grinding or something going on. It just adds another kind of texture and adds more of a kind of bleak tone as well. And then Proceed the Flint also gives you a really good kind of variety of tempos as well, and different extremities, starting like really slow and intimate with like clean kind of picked guitars, and then has another one that has a really kind of like cold atmosphere, like I felt like there's almost like a wind blowing in the background or something. But it kind of slowly builds into something much more sludge driven. Again, little kind of touches of noise rock in there as well before it kind of transitions back into the clean guitar to close out. One thing though that just like was consistently awesome on this release is the sound of that bass guitar. Like every track I was like, oh, there's that bass again. Oh yes. It's like all girth. Like the sound of that bass is ridiculous. And it kind of shows like how good a job Scott Evans has done with the album, because no matter how heavy or like destructive the album gets, you can always hear the character of that bass coming through. And sometimes they'll pair it up with whatever the guitar is doing, so it gives it really like a lot of weight and bottom end to a heavy riff. And other times you hear it kind of like creeping off and doing something a little bit on its own. But I really enjoyed it. The bass production in particular was excellent. But
there's some bands there that fall into the trap that you need the heaviest distortion on your guitar and the biggest detune on your guitar. And then, like to mention French metal bands again, Gojira are the exception to the Gojira production consistently is one of the heaviest things you'll hear. And it's not because they're detuned the heaviest, it's just the bass is produced incredibly well in that band.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, when they hit into a groove or they drop into something, because the production and the guitars and the bass are so well in sync with the percussion, you get that heavy feel. Like Wren, like the guitars could be playing something, and they do at times, higher, more leady and kind of atmospheric, and that bass sitting underneath it gives you all the distortion and heaviness that a detuned guitar would give you.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just smart songwriting.
And like Scott Evans just has a way of like
bringing
crafting a really like kind of like meaty metallic guitar tone that sounds monstrous, but also has this like kind of like mood to it as well at the same time. It's really good at what he does. Drum tones as well are killer on this album. So I mentioned the music, which is great. I love the music on the album. Vocally, I think is where the album just really adds like another level. And I feel like that's where a lot of the kind of pain and misery comes from on this album is in the vocals. Owen Jones.
And the reverb. You know what I mean? It's soaked into the reverb. Like you hear the note and you're like, oh, and then it just continues to kind of echo out. You're like, oh.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. The kind of vocal lines that he's delivering, you feel like he's kind of reliving it when you're listening to the album. There's got so much like kind of anguish in his vocal tone that you can't not be like completely like hooked on what he's doing. It's never outdone or overdone either though. There are moments in the album where they just kind of let the power and the weight of the music do the talking, where there are no vocals, but then when he does add his kind of layer of emotion, it just brings it up another notch. The echo thing was really cool. I really enjoyed that as well. The way the vocals kind of ring out during the riff, it was a little bit kind of like reminding me a little bit of like Conan in that respect. And like Owen and John from Conan don't sound alike, but some of the kind of the rhythmic ideas and some of the timing was similar, and just because of that echo, Conan used that as well quite a lot. It was quite kind of just reminded me of that band when I was listening to it. This is a really, really good album. Deceivingly easy to come back to as well. The length of the album helps. It's been 35 minutes, but it was one of those albums that kind of revealed a little bit more to me on every listen. I never really became bored of this at all. And even now, like I listened to it again today, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, there's a bit of lead work that I'd never noticed before. That closing track actually has some really cool bits of lead on it that are a little bit more kind of buried further down in the mix, but it was just like, there's little things that'll pop out. You're like, oh, fuck, I never even noticed that. Like as miserable as this comes across, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I always love hearing Scott Evans' work. He's absolutely killing it as a producer. What about yourself? What did you think?
Dave, get ready to tick this off your bingo card because there is a lot to like when listening to Wren. This is a surprising little bastard. Like, genuinely, like, you come off those two opening tracks and you genuinely feel you have a grasp on how miserable and heavy this experience is going to be.
Yeah.
And Betrayal of the Self doesn't necessarily break that as the third track, but it does open up and it's a bit shorter, so it's about half the length of the preceding tracks.
Yeah.
So you get a kind of, like, you still kind of have a grasp. And then the album, and this is borderline fucking genius, hits you with the clever placement of kind of an instrumental interlude, Cerebral Drift, into Metric of Grief. And Metric of Grief to me is the sleeper song on this album because it comes just before Proceeds of Flint and Scorch Hinds, which are two like great like build up to closing albums. But Metric of Grief is the one that I think is the most experimental song on the album. It plays off almost predominantly clean guitars all the way through it, but kind of noise rock, jangly, jazzy, discordant chords.
Yeah. And
there's like a prominent reverb on the vocals and like space. The drums are just kind of, the drums are playing in the background. There might not be an instrument over, and there's this kind of wailing vocal over the top of it. I've always said that like grief or loss can be something that can bury you if you don't get it out. It can make you very, very ill. And the best way to try and get out your system is to do something creative with it. And the best music, I think, is born of that. Where you hear someone like putting it on the page, like putting it in a riff, getting it out their system as a way to cathartically get through what they're feeling. And what's interesting is that the ideas of loss and grief and whatnot are universal. Everyone experiences them. And that's why they resonate with us. Some people don't want to feel that way, and that's why they don't listen to things that aren't like the happiest Sabrina Carpenter track. You know what I mean? Other people do. Like, I myself enjoy to listen to music that makes me feel not miserable, but makes me feel blue. Like, just like something to latch onto. And Black Rain Falls is a great example of that. They never over-egg anything in here, and it would be easy to cliche it up and fall into little tropes. And they never do that. I'd like if I had to give this album my one-word description, I'd say harrowing. That's how I felt all the way through it. I felt the pain, I felt the nuance, and I felt the trying to make sense of a horrible thing all the way right through it from start to finish. And I don't read the PR. I don't do any of the press stuff. It was clear to me it was about someone dying. I didn't realise it was about someone committing suicide. But I get it though. I get it, and it's all the way through here. It's a really special album. I think they've managed to. They're not the first band to do sludge and post metal together. There are plenty of bands that do it. Their take on it's really interesting though, because I've found in the past that bands will be either predominantly a post metal band with sludge riffs, or a sludge band with post metal riffs. And I think Wren actually weirdly kind of managed to balance both almost equally. It kind of feels at odds of how those two genres should operate, but they employ the kind of post metal soundscape and kind of atmosphere with those moments of crushing sludge riffs in a way which is not like, it's like, once again, it's not revolutionary, but it kind of sounds refreshing here. I thought this was brilliant. I thought it was really, really, really well put together. And I think had they just continued to deliver tracks like Betrayal of the Self through Cerebral Drift and Metric of Grief, I don't think this album would have resonated as much with me. I think that meander off into something else, to me, makes the album stand out more when it comes to the heavier close, but also deliver. Like, Grief is not all loud, angry, abrasive, and you know, and someone yelling in your face.
Yeah.
It can also be quiet and vulnerable and spacey, and that they capture all that in a really, really interesting artistic way. Church Road Records, I mean, what do we say?
Yep.
Continually raising, like, we had never heard of these guys before. And I'm going to put out there, we tend to know quite a lot about bands. So, but they once again bring your attention to bands that are really doing something kind of smart and something really interesting. So it's a great home for them. I hope great things for this band. I would love to see this live. See like a small Hug and Pint, a small dark, smoky venue. It's just sweaty and miserable and just that loud as fuck in my face.
Yep.
I'd pay to see that, Dave.
Yeah.
So yeah, like this is. I mean, if you're having the best month of your life, maybe don't put it on. But for everyone else, put it on.
If you're Dave, put it on. Put it on. Let's get it on. Okay, final thing for the new Wren album, Black Rain Falls. Ratings for this release. Yeah, this is super strong. Like I really enjoyed this one. One of the better albums I've heard in January. I mean, it's very, very close to a 5 for me. Not quite there, but it's a 4.5. It's like super strong. Church Road again, just the quality that label are putting out is just ridiculous. Like I can't think of the last time they put out something that was just kind of like average. Like I honestly can't remember. And this is another great addition to the roster and another killer album. 4.5 for me. What are you thinking?
I'm right there with you. I think it's a really, really, really fucking great album. I'm curious to see where they go next.
Yeah. Wren, Black Rain Falls, out on February 21st on Church Road Records. Links below to the band and the pre-order. Have a listen, check it out. Let us know what you think. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.